Assalamu alaikum and good morning class. So in this session we will be continuing the discussion on conceptual framework on the elements of financial statements and the presentation of financial statements. So the elements of financial statements. So our financial statements should have comparability and consistency. Comparability in the sense that there is uniform application of accounting method between and across entities in the same industry. So in the same industry, okay? So example, in the industry of food industry, so the accounting methods, okay, are the same between and among like Jollibee and McDonald's, KFC, so more or less the same, application. So this is actually the goal. So to achieve this goal, we need consistency. Consistency in the sense that there is uniform application of accounting method from period to period within an entity. So within sa Jollibee mismo, dapat yung uniform yung application ng accounting methods niya. So hindi yung one method for this for this year and then switch to another method next year. So hindi na siya consistent. Okay, so what are our elements of financial statements? So we have basically 5. We have asset, liability, equity, income, and expense. So as you can see here, our 5 elements, okay, are divided into 2. There are elements that will be used in the measurement of financial position in the asset, liability, and equity. So that's in the financial position. And we also have the elements for the measurement of financial performance, the income and expense. Okay, so this is actually just a review of the basic accounting that you have learned from your senior high. Okay, so what are assets? Assets are present economic resource, again controlled by the entity as a result of the past event. So yung essential characteristics of an asset are, first, it should be controlled by the entity. Okay, so control, okay, is the actual exercise of ownership. Letter B, it should be the result of past transaction or event, whether nabili na, okay, or ginawa na in the past. Letter C, the asset provides future economic benefits. So, dapat merong pakinabang. Okay, yung asset na ito. Dapat meron siyang ma-generate na future economic benefit. And last, the cost of the asset can be measured reliably. So, dapat makakome up ng reliable measurement of that asset. Okay, so that is the observe natin for asset recognition principle. So again, there are 2 conditions to consider. First, probable that future economic benefits will flow to the entity. And next, it can be measured reliably. Okay, so yan, probable and can be measured reliably. Okay, so yung tangibility and ownership, take note, are not essential characteristics of assets. Okay, so also the presence or absence of expenditure is not necessary in determining the existence of assets. Okay, so for the cost principle, this requires that the assets can be measured initially at original cost or acquisition cost. So, dapat ma-measure natin siya, reliably. It's either at original cost or the acquisition cost. Okay, so now let's discuss the next element, which is liability. So again, this is a present, Present obligation, hindi siya past. Kasi pag past, ibig sabihin wala ka ng utang. So it should be present, still existing from past transaction or event. Okay, so the settlement of which will result to an outflow, of resources. Okay, so it's either by cash or another asset. Okay, so the essential characteristics of liability, it should be a present obligation. Second, it should arise from past transaction. And third, the settlement of liability should require an outflow of resources. Okay, So take note that the identification of payee and certainty of timing of settlement and the amount of liability are not essential characteristics of liabilities. Okay. So for liability recognition principles, so there are two conditions to consider. First, it should be probable, no, that an outflow of economic benefits will be required for the settlement of such present obligation, and the amount of obligation can be measured reliably. Okay, next is income. So as what we've known and learned in the past, income is the increase in economic benefit during the accounting period. It's either in an inflow or increase of asset or either a decrease of liability. That will result to increase in equity. Okay? So as long as these increases are not contribution from equity participants or stock owners. So it is an inflow future benefit that increases equity. So income encompasses both revenue and gains that was discussed in your senior high. Okay, so what is our income recognition principle? So it's the basic principle: income shall be recognized when earned. Okay, so there are two conditions to consider. It is probable that future economic benefits will flow to the entity. So it's either nag-increase yung asset in the form of cash or accounts receivable or a decrease in liability. You forgive or you forgo yung liability mo. Okay? So the economic benefit second should be measured reliably. So what is this point of sale? Point of sale is the legal title to the goods passes to the buyer at point of sale. So usually it is the point of delivery. So yung legal title will pass from from seller to buyer at the point of sale or at the point of delivery. Okay, so there are exceptions to the point of sale. So we have this installment method. Okay, the revenue is recognized at the point of collection. Okay, we have cost recovery method or sunk cost method at the point of collection also. Percentage of completion method. Okay, contract revenue and contract cost will be recognized as revenue and expenses based on the stage of the completion of the contract. And the production method whereby the revenue is recognized at the point of production. So these are the exceptions to the point of sale. Okay, now let's go to expense. Okay, so expense is any decrease in economic benefit during the accounting period in the form of outflow or decrease in asset and increase in liability that results in decrease in equity as long as hindi siya galing from the equity participant. Okay, so our expense recognition principle is basic. Expenses are recognized when incurred. So again, two conditions to consider. It is probable, and it should be measured reliably. That's the recognition. Okay, so ano pala yung matching principle? So again, matching principle is applied in expense recognition principle. Okay, so this requires that our costs and expenses incurred relating to our revenue should be reported in the same period as when the revenue is recognized. So there are three applications of matching principle. We have cause and effect association. So expense is recognized when the revenue is already recognized. So usually ito yung na-refer natin na matching of cost with revenue. So example, cost of merchandise inventory. So when we recognize yung mga sale of that particular units, we also recognize the cost of that particular merchandise inventory. Doubtful accounts. So doubtful accounts and expense, relating to our accounts receivable. Okay. So next is the warranty expense. Again, dependent to sales, and the sales commission, also dependent to sales. Second, there is a systematic and rational allocation. So costs are expensed by simply allocating them over the periods benefited. So as long as economic benefits are expected to arise over several accounting periods, and association with income can only be broadly or indirectly determined. So talagang tinitingnan ito, ina-allocate natin in the basis of systematic allocation procedure. So example yung depreciation. Okay? So hindi naman natin siya pwede one time, but we spread that over the life, no, of the PPE. The same with amortization, okay, and the same with allocation of prepaid rent, insurance, and other prepayments. So we also have immediate recognition. So expenses recognized immediately when, okay, as long as expenditure produces no future economic benefit. So example, ano yung example nito? Yung mga salaries of officers, administrative expenses, advertising and selling expenses, or basically lahat ng mga operating expenses natin. So wala ka ng future economic benefit na i-expect sa operating expenses because that's already expense. So that's immediate recognition. So as what we have discussed a while ago, we discussed the recognition of the elements of our financial statements. Now, let's discuss the measurement. So, how would our elements be measured? So, it's historical cost, basically current cost, realizable value, and present value. Okay, so historical cost is the measurement based on the price at the time of the recognition of the element. At the time of the recognition of the element. Kung kailan natin siya i-recognize as an element of financial statement, doon natin yun yung cost niya, historical cost. So, it is the consideration paid to acquire the asset plus transaction cost. Okay, so the historical cost of a liability is also the consideration received to incur the liability minus transaction cost. Second, we have the current value. Okay, so this measures the element updated. So always in update to reflect the conditions at the measurement date. Okay, so current value includes the following. So we have fair value. This is the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability for a transaction between market participants. So this is actually, fair value is not entity specific. So this is the price that is acceptable at the market at that time, the fair value. Okay. Next, value in use, the present value of the cash flows of economic benefits. So, yung sinasalihan natin dito ng mga discount rates, no? And we also have fulfillment value, the present value of the cash or other economic resource that an entity expects to be obliged to transfer as it fulfills a liability. Okay, so value in use and fulfillment value do not include transaction cost in acquiring an asset or incurring the liability, but rather include transaction cost expected, yung mga expected to be incurred on the ultimate disposal of the asset or fulfillment of the liability. Take note of that. So we also have the current cost of the asset. So it is the cost of an equivalent asset at the measurement date. So ito yung yung consideration niya that would be paid at the measurement date plus transaction cost that would be incurred on that date. So if for liability, ano yung ma-receive for an equivalent liability at this date minus transaction cost? So again, pag asset plus transaction cost, liability minus the transaction cost, and that, what is the cost? Okay, so note lang, current cost and historical cost are entry value, while value in use, fulfillment value, and fair value are exit values. So actually, this subject class is just like theory of accounts. So we will discuss theory all throughout. Okay, importante na intindihan natin yung theory. Okay. Okay, so as we are done with the recognition, the measurement, so let's go to the presentation and disclosure. Okay, so yung information about our elements, basically the assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense, nakikita natin in the presented, no, and disclosed financial statements. Okay, so effective communication must require focusing on presentation, disclosure objectives, and principles rather than on rules. Second, classifying information by grouping similar items and separating dissimilar items. Third, aggregating information in a manner that is not obscured either by excessive detail or by excessive summarization. So, yung nakalagay kasi sa financial statements natin are the line item amounts, okay? Or the line item, no? The element, the account title, the general account title. We can see more how it is composed, or what it consists in the presentation and disclosures. So take for instance receivables. Receivables is just one line item, no? But in the notes, in the presentation and the disclosure, okay, especially in the disclosure, makikita mo doon yung summary or yung detail on what consists of receivables. So we have accounts receivable, receivable from officers, notes receivable, so on. So take note that classification refers to the sorting of assets, liabilities, equity, income, or expenses with similar nature, function, and measurement basis for presentation disclosure purposes. Okay, so when we aggregate it, we add together, no, as long as they share the same characteristics in the same classification. Okay, so for example, receivables or investment securities, and then from investment securities, doon natin ilalagay investment in so and so, investment in so and so, and so on. Okay, so now that we are done with what are the elements of financial statements, their measurement, their recognition first, then their measurement, and then their presentation and disclosure. Okay, so now let's go to the concepts of capital and capital maintenance. So what is the concept of capital? So there are two actually, the physical concept and the financial concept and the physical concept. Financial concept is that the capital is synonymous with the net asset. No? So this is the concept adopted by most enterprises. We also have the physical concept. So it is regarded as the productive capacity of the enterprise based on, example lang, yung units of output per day. Okay, so we have here the concepts of capital maintenance. So for financial concept, financial concept of capital, which is adopted by most, no, a profit is earned only if the financial or money amount of the net assets at the end of the period exceeds the financial amount of the net assets at the beginning of the period. So after excluding any distribution or yung mga dividends and contributions from owners during the period or additional investment. So pag meron daw changes, no, yung net asset natin, let's say from 50 naging 80, and then walang hindi tayo nagbigay ng dividend or walang additional investment, then that's the time we recognize profit. So usually ito yung ginagamit ng most enterprises and most of the problems that we solve. So we also have the physical capital maintenance. So under this concept, a profit is earned only, okay, if the physical productive capacity or operating capability of the enterprise or the resources needed to achieve that capacity at the end of the period exceeds the physical productive capacity at the beginning of the period. Okay, after excluding, again, any distribution or contributions from owners of the period. So, ayan yung physical productive capacity. Okay, so dapat mas malaki, no, at the end, yung physical productive capacity as contrasted to the net assets sa capital, cost of financial capital. Okay. Sa physical capital, yung physical productive capacity talaga niya. Okay? Okay, so the financial statements and reporting entities. So again, ano yung objective and scope of financial statements? So again, na-discuss na ito last time, no, to provide financial information about the entities, assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expenses. No, na nagagamit in assessing the entity's prospect for future net cash inflows. Saan ito gagamitin? Ano kayong prospect, no? Plano, no? For future net cash inflow. And then, for the management stewardship over economic resources. So, na-assess, looking at the financial statement, na-assess how the management took care, no? Managed the economic resources. So, this information, no? Are provided in the statement of financial position, yung previously balance sheet, for the recognized assets, liabilities, and equity, and statement of financial performance for income and expenses. And we have other statements and notes. So the reporting period of financial statements prepared for a specified period of time or the reporting period. Also, financial statements provide comparative information basta at least one preceding reporting period. So, if this is 2021, at least may comparative information siya for 2020. Yan talaga yung financial statements. Reporting entity, the entity who must or choose to prepare the financial statement and not necessarily a legal entity. So we have different types of financial statements. Few types. We have consolidated. So parent and subsidiary report as a single reporting entity. So for example, we have the URC, Universal Robina Corporation. So it's the parent. Okay. It's the umbrella company. So, nandiyan na yung Jack and Jill. So, yun, yung lahat ng mga subsidiary na. Unconsolidated or individual. So, a parent alone provides report. Okay, so this may be the case between Jollibee, no? And we also have combined. Reporting entity comprises two or more entities not linked by parent-subsidiary relationship. Okay, so as what we've known already, we have this basic financial statements, no? Statement of financial position. Ito nga yung balance sheet. Okay? Second is the statement of income, no? So ito yung tinitin natin yung bottom line or yung profit or loss or the net income or loss. Statement of changes in equity. Okay, so alam na natin, this is the reconciliation, no? Between yung carrying amount at the beginning at saka yung end, no? Of each of our equity. Okay, so saan ba galing yung mga changes, okay, ng equity? So from, let's say, net assets of 500 in the beginning, naging 600. Okay, so ano yung changes dyan? Next, the statement of cash flows for the reporting period. So, this provide about the changes in cash and cash equivalents. So, these are coming from the changes from our operating activities, okay, investing activities, and financing activities. Okay, so operating activities, ito yung nakikita natin sa income statement, okay, the sales and the expense. Investing activities, ito yung nakikita natin sa asset portion natin. Basically, more on the non-current assets like yung mga investment natin in real estate, building, land, okay, property, plant, and equipment. Ito yung mga investing activities pag bumibili tayo ng mga ganyan or nagbebenta tayo ng mga ganyan. Financing activities, ito yung nakikita natin on the other side of the balance sheet, the liability and equity. So, yung debt financing, nangutang tayo, okay, borrowed tayo from loans payable, notes payable, and also financing, equity financing, the equity capital provided by the owners in the form of additional stock subscriptions, okay, additional capital investment, and others. So, we also have the notes. Ito yung summary of significant accounting policies. So, dito nakalagay yung mga accounting policies na ginamit for receivables, for investment, okay, and other explanatory information. So, ito yung ina-add natin, no? So, for those information that we presented are A, B, C, and D. Okay, so this is just an overview, no, of your a repetition of what you have read, no, in the chapter in your self-study and also what you have learned in previously in your senior high. Okay, so again, for this subject 111, we are dealing with the theory. Okay, we are discussing actually TOA. Okay, so this is very important. So that's why in quizzes and exams, more on theory. Okay, so that would be all. Thank you.